Do you remember when animated commercials could completely rewire your brain before you even knew what marketing was? Picture this. You're 7 years old, sprawled across the orange shag carpet in your family's living room. The smell of your mom's tuna casserole drifts from the kitchen while Saturday morning cartoons flicker on that massive wood-paneled television set. Then suddenly, between episodes of Schoolhouse Rock, a 30-second animated spot appears that will live rent-free in your head for the next 50 years. You didn't know it then, but you were experiencing the golden age of psychological manipulation disguised as entertainment, and you absolutely loved every second of it. The 1970s marked a revolutionary period in advertising psychology. Marketers had discovered something profound about the developing brain. Children between ages 4 and 11 couldn't distinguish between entertainment and advertising. This wasn't accidental oversight, it was deliberate exploitation of cognitive development stages. Armed with this knowledge and unlimited budgets, major corporations unleashed an army of animated characters specifically designed to bypass critical thinking and plant desires directly into young minds. What made these commercials so devastatingly effective wasn't just their animation, it was their sophisticated understanding of behavioral conditioning. Each 30-second spot employed repetition patterns, musical mnemonics, and character association techniques that would make Pavlov proud. The jingles weren't just catchy, they were engineered using specific musical intervals that triggered dopamine release. The characters weren't just cute, they were designed using color psychology and facial geometry that naturally appealed to children's neurological responses. Let's start with the most insidious example of all. Tony the Tiger selling Frosted Flakes. You can probably hear his voice right now, can't you? That booming, they're red wasn't just enthusiasm. It was carefully modulated audio designed to mimic the frequency patterns of an excited parent. Kellogg's spent millions studying how children respond to different vocal tones, discovering that Tony's specific pitch and rhythm triggered the same neural pathways as parental approval. The animation itself used a technique called anthropomorphic conditioning. Tony walked upright like dad, wore clothes like a responsible adult, and spoke with authority like a teacher. Children's brains naturally categorize talking animals as trustworthy authority figures, a psychological quirk that Kellogg's exploited ruthlessly. Every morning, millions of kids demanded sugar-coated cornflakes because a cartoon tiger had convinced them it was the breakfast of champions. The cereal contained more sugar per serving than a Twinkie, but Tony made it feel like health food. Then there was the Pillsbury Doughboy, whose very existence was a masterclass in tactile marketing psychology. That little white character wasn't just adorable, he was scientifically engineered to trigger nurturing instincts. His soft, rounded features activated the same neural responses that make puppies irresistible. The famous poke and giggle sequence tapped into children's desire for physical interaction with their toys. The Doughboy's voice was perhaps the most manipulative element. That high-pitched giggle was recorded at precisely 440 Hz, the same frequency that human infants use when content and safe. Your brain heard that laugh and immediately associated Pillsbury products with comfort and security. The fact that the products were essentially processed flour and preservatives became irrelevant when your limbic system was convinced this little guy was your friend. The genius lay in the character's vulnerability. Unlike powerful figures like Tony the Tiger, the Doughboy seemed fragile and innocent. Children felt protective toward him, creating an emotional investment in his well-being. When mom bought Pillsbury products, kids felt like they were helping their friend. This wasn't selling food, this was manufacturing emotional dependency.
Your kids will love McDonald's Happy Meal. It's food and fun in a box.
McDonald's took this psychological manipulation to unprecedented levels with their cast of McDonaldland characters. Ronald McDonald himself was a deliberate Bozo the Clown knockoff, designed to trigger existing positive associations with circus entertainment. But the supporting cast, Grimace, the Hamburglar, Mayor McCheese, represented something far more sophisticated, a complete fantasy world where processed fast food was the foundation of friendship and adventure. Each character embodied specific psychological archetypes. Grimace was the lovable, harmless giant who made large consumption seem normal and fun. The Hamburglar was the mischievous rebel who made stealing hamburgers seem playful rather than wrong. Mayor McCheese represented authority figures endorsing McDonald's as community-approved nutrition. Together, they created a narrative universe where visiting McDonald's wasn't just eating, it was entering a magical realm where your deepest social needs would be met. The commercials used rapid scene changes and bright color flashes to maintain constant stimulation, preventing critical thinking about what was actually being sold. Children couldn't process the disconnect between the fantastical McDonaldland adventures and the reality of sitting in a plastic booth eating mechanically processed meat. The animation created such powerful emotional associations that decades later, adults still feel nostalgic warmth when they see those golden arches, even knowing the nutritional reality. Can you feel your brain betraying you right now, conjuring warm memories of characters you logically know were designed to manipulate you? The cereal aisle became a psychological battlefield where animated mascots waged war for your breakfast loyalty, and lucky the leprechaun was perhaps the most devious warrior of all. That Irish accent wasn't chosen randomly. It tapped into centuries of folklore associating leprechauns with hidden treasures and magical rewards. General Mills understood that children's brains are hardwired to seek treasure, so they created a character whose entire existence revolved around protecting colorful marshmallow bits that looked exactly like tiny gems. The brilliance was in the chase dynamic. Every commercial showed children pursuing Lucky, trying to steal his cereal. This wasn't just entertainment, it was conditioning kids to believe that Lucky Charms were so valuable that magical creatures would fight to keep them. The marshmallow shapes themselves were carefully designed. Hearts triggered emotional attachment, stars represented achievement, rainbows symbolized wonder. Each bite became a treasure hunt, transforming breakfast into an adventure game. The magically delicious slogan employed what psychologists call transference of properties. By repeatedly associating the cereal with magic, children began believing the food itself possessed special powers. The sugar rush from the massive amounts of corn syrup felt like evidence of this magic working. Lucky's pot of gold became a metaphor for the energy boost kids experienced, creating a feedback loop that made the advertising feel truthful. Remember how Lucky would always escape at the end, clutching his cereal box? That unresolved tension was intentional. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. Incomplete narratives stick in memory far longer than resolved ones. Kids spent hours between commercials imagining scenarios where they might finally catch Lucky and claim their prize. The cereal became a symbol of an adventure that could never quite be completed. Captain Crunch took a different approach, using military authority to legitimize sugar consumption. The captain wasn't just a mascot, he was a commanding officer giving nutritional orders. His uniform, his ship, his crew of kids all reinforced the message that eating the cereal was a patriotic duty. The Crunch Berries spin-off was pure genius. They took an already questionable breakfast food and added bright red artificial berries that looked like candy but carried the captain's seal of approval. The most insidious element was the cuts the roof of your mouth phenomenon that every kid experienced but somehow accepted as normal. Quaker Oats actually engineered the cereal's texture to be deliberately abrasive, creating a unique physical sensation that became part of the brand experience. Children associated the mouth pain with toughness, feeling like they were earning their place in the captain's crew by enduring the discomfort. This wasn't a bug, it was a feature that made the cereal memorable through physical conditioning. The Trix rabbit represented perhaps the cruelest psychological manipulation of all, systematic exclusion based on age discrimination. Silly rabbit, tricks are for kids, wasn't just a catchphrase, it was a manifesto declaring that this sugar bomb cereal was exclusively for children. The rabbit's constant failure to obtain the cereal created a scarcity narrative that made Trix feel precious and forbidden. Watch those commercials again as an adult, and you'll notice something disturbing. The rabbit is clearly suffering. He's desperately hungry, constantly rejected, and emotionally devastated by his failures. Children identified with his desire while simultaneously feeling superior to his adult status. The message was clear. Childhood was a special time with special privileges, and Trix was the password to that exclusive club. The cruelest twist was that kids actually voted in real polls about whether the rabbit should get Trix, and they consistently voted no. General Mills had successfully trained children to actively participate in denying satisfaction to a character they sympathized with. This wasn't just selling cereal, it was teaching kids that exclusion and cruelty could be fun when you were part of the in-group. Moving beyond breakfast, the Coca-Cola polar bears created an entirely new category of emotional manipulation: environmental association. These weren't just cute animals selling soda, they were ambassadors from a pristine Arctic world where Coca-Cola was the natural refreshment choice. The bears' habitat was always sparkling white snow, crystal clear ice, and pure blue skies, creating subconscious associations between Coke and environmental purity. The animation style was deliberately realistic enough to feel documentary-like, but stylized enough to feel magical. Children's brains processed these commercials as glimpses into a real place where happy bear families gathered around Coca-Cola like campfires. The fizzing sound of the bottle opening became associated with the crisp Arctic air, making every sip feel like a breath of mountain freshness, rather than a gulp of high-fructose corn syrup. The genius was in the family dynamics. The bears always appeared in multi-generational groups, with cubs learning to enjoy Coke from their parents. This normalized soda consumption as a family tradition passed down through generations, not a corporate product pushed by marketers. When your family cracked open Cokes together, you were unconsciously mimicking the wholesome bear family rituals you'd absorbed through hundreds of commercial exposures. The Energizer bunny operated on pure anxiety psychology. That relentless drumming wasn't cheerful, it was designed to create urgency and restlessness. The bunny's march through various scenarios interrupted other commercials, breaking the fourth wall and suggesting that Energizer batteries powered not just toys, but the entire advertising universe itself. The keeps going and going mantra tapped into one of childhood's deepest fears: things breaking or running out of power. Every kid had experienced the devastating moment when their favorite toy died due to dead batteries. The Energizer bunny promised to prevent that trauma, positioning the brand as a protector against disappointment and loss. But here's where the psychology got really twisted. The bunny's persistence was actually annoying. That constant drumming, that endless marching, that interruption of other entertainment created low-level stress. Your brain learned to associate that stress with the need for reliable power sources, making Energizer feel essential for peace of mind. The bunny wasn't just advertising batteries, it was manufacturing anxiety about battery failure that only Energizer could resolve. Do you remember feeling genuinely worried about whether your toys would keep working, even when the batteries were brand new?
Hot kids like you, Kool-Aid for hot kids like you.
The Kool-Aid Man's dramatic, wall-busting entrances weren't just slapstick comedy. They were training children to associate property destruction with refreshment and excitement. Every commercial featured the same ritualistic sequence. Kids would express thirst, call for help, and suddenly this massive anthropomorphic pitcher would explode through someone's wall, shouting, "Oh yeah!" The psychological conditioning was profound. Problems could be solved through dramatic, destructive intervention, and the resulting chaos was something to celebrate. The most disturbing element was how the property damage was always ignored. Homeowners would smile and welcome this destructive force, teaching children that adult approval could be earned through disruptive behavior if you brought the right product. The Kool-Aid Man wasn't selling flavored sugar water. He was selling the fantasy that breaking rules and destroying things would make you popular and beloved. The "oh yeah" catchphrase itself employed what linguists call affirmative conditioning. That phrase became synonymous with enthusiasm and confidence in children's minds. Kids would unconsciously echo it during moments of excitement, reinforcing their emotional connection to the brand through their own speech patterns. The Kool-Aid Man had literally invaded their vocabulary, making them walking advertisements for his product. The Chester Cheetah campaigns for Cheetos represented perhaps the most sophisticated example of cool by association marketing psychology. Chester wasn't just a mascot, he was a lifestyle guru teaching children that being sneaky, selfish, and appearance-obsessed were desirable traits. His sunglasses, his swagger, his constant scheming to steal other people's Cheetos painted antisocial behavior as the height of coolness. The orange finger dust became a badge of honor rather than evidence of poor hygiene. Chester taught kids that leaving messy evidence of your snack consumption was actually proof you'd achieved something special. The dangerously cheesy slogan reframed the artificial orange coating as a thrilling risk rather than a chemical concern. Children began seeking out foods that would leave visible traces on their bodies, competing to show who had consumed the most dangerous snacks. Chester's personality was deliberately designed to appeal to children's rebellion fantasies while remaining safe enough for parents to tolerate. He broke minor rules and caused harmless mischief, providing an outlet for rule-breaking impulses without crossing lines that would get the commercials banned. Kids could vicariously experience being the cool rule breaker through Chester while still maintaining their good kid status in real life. The Michelin Man took tire advertising into surreal psychological territory by creating a character made entirely of the product itself. This wasn't just anthropomorphization, it was teaching children to see industrial rubber products as friendly, living beings. The white puffy appearance made toxic tire materials look soft and cuddly, like marshmallows or clouds. The genius was in the Bibendum character's indestructibility. Every commercial showed him surviving car crashes, punctures, and extreme weather, while maintaining his cheerful demeanor. Children's brains absorbed this as evidence that Michelin tires possessed magical protective powers. Family car trips felt safer when Dad chose Michelin, because kids genuinely believed their tire mascot friend was personally protecting them. The most subtle manipulation was how the Michelin Man appeared in family scenarios, playing with children and participating in domestic activities. This transformed tire purchasing from a boring adult responsibility into a decision that affected children's well-being. Kids began requesting specific tire brands, turning automotive safety equipment into a character-based choice like choosing breakfast cereal. The California Raisins singing and dancing commercials created an entirely new category of fruit-based peer pressure. These weren't just raisins. They were a hip musical group whose membership required consuming dried grapes. The I Heard It Through the Grapevine soundtrack was deliberately chosen for its association with secret knowledge and insider information. The animation style made the raisins look like tiny leather-skinned performers, transforming dried fruit from a healthy snack into entertainment personalities. Children wanted to eat raisins not for nutrition, but to feel connected to this cool musical community. The commercials implied that consuming raisins would give you rhythm, style, and social acceptance. The most insidious element was how the raisins' wrinkled appearance became associated with wisdom and experience rather than age and decay. Kids learned to see dried, processed fruit as more sophisticated than fresh alternatives. The California Raisins turned dehydration into a desirable characteristic, making children prefer foods that looked old and withered over ones that looked fresh and alive. The Hamburger Helper glove took convenience food marketing into deeply personal territory by creating a character that represented maternal care and domestic competence. That white glove wasn't just a mascot, it was a stand-in for mom's hands, making boxed pasta mixes feel like homemade expressions of love. The glove's ability to cook, stir, and serve food created the illusion that the product itself was actively caring for the family. Children absorbed the message that busy mothers could still provide loving meals through this magical helper. The guilt relief marketing was brilliant. Working mothers felt like they were still fulfilling their nurturing role by choosing Hamburger Helper, while kids felt like they were eating food prepared by a caring character rather than rehydrated chemicals. The talking glove's personality was deliberately warm and encouraging, providing emotional support alongside meal preparation. Kids formed genuine attachments to this disembodied hand, seeing it as a family friend rather than a corporate mascot. The psychological impact was profound. Children learned to associate processed convenience foods with comfort and care rather than shortcuts and artificial ingredients. The Mr. Clean advertisements turned household cleaning products into superhero mythology. That muscled, bald figure with supernatural cleaning powers wasn't selling soap. He was selling the fantasy that domestic chores could be conquered through masculine strength and magical intervention. His genie-like appearance suggested that proper cleaning required supernatural assistance rather than ordinary human effort. The sparkling sound effects and dramatic lighting changes when Mr. Clean appeared created a transformation narrative where dirty became pristine through heroic intervention. Children learned to see cleaning as an exciting adventure rather than mundane work, but only if the right products were involved. The psychological conditioning made generic cleaning supplies feel inadequate compared to Mr. Clean's magical arsenal. The most subtle manipulation was how Mr. Clean's muscular physique associated cleaning ability with physical strength and masculine competence. This created complex gender dynamics where cleaning products needed to be strong enough rather than simply effective, introducing performance anxiety into basic household maintenance. Can you still picture that confident wink and hear that whistle, even though you probably haven't seen those commercials in decades? The scrubbing bubbles took bathroom cleaning into animated fantasy territory that was both delightful and deeply manipulative. Those cheerful little soap bubbles with tiny voices and determined expressions transformed the mundane task of bathroom maintenance into a military campaign led by cute, devoted soldiers. Each bubble had a personality, a mission, and most importantly, a willingness to sacrifice itself for the cleanliness cause. Children watched these endearing characters march into battle against soap scum, knowing full well they would dissolve and die in the process. The psychological impact was staggering. Kids learned to see cleaning products not as inanimate chemicals, but as living allies who deserved loyalty and respect. The bubbles' cheerful acceptance of their own destruction taught children that self-sacrifice for household cleanliness was noble and necessary. When mom sprayed scrubbing bubbles in the bathroom, kids felt like they were witnessing an act of heroism rather than routine maintenance. The animation deliberately made the soap scum and dirt look like menacing villains with angry faces and threatening postures. This transformed bathroom cleaning from a hygiene necessity into a moral battle between good and evil, with the scrubbing bubbles as tiny crusaders fighting for family health. Children internalized the message that only these specific chemical warriors could protect their family from the evil forces lurking in shower corners.
Kellogg's Frosted Flakes are the frosted sweet part of this complete breakfast.
The Frosted Flakes commercials featuring Tony the Tiger's athletic endorsements went far beyond simple cereal promotion. They were systematically rewiring children's understanding of nutrition and physical performance. Tony didn't just eat Frosted Flakes. He attributed his strength, speed, and sporting success directly to consuming sugar-coated cornflakes for breakfast. This created a direct causal link in children's minds between eating candy-level sugar and achieving athletic excellence. The most insidious aspect was how these commercials aired during Saturday. Morning cartoon blocks, immediately before and after shows featuring superhero characters. Children's brains naturally grouped Tony's strength with Superman's powers, creating subconscious associations between Frosted Flakes and supernatural abilities. Kids genuinely believed that eating the cereal would make them faster, stronger, and more capable in sports and physical activities. Their grit roar became a victory cry that children would echo during their own physical activities. Playground games, bike rides, and backyard adventures all featured kids channeling Tony's enthusiasm, while mentally crediting their breakfast choice for any success they experienced. Kellogg's had successfully convinced an entire generation that processed sugar was athletic fuel. The Frito Bandito represented one of the most problematic examples of cultural stereotyping in animated advertising, yet his psychological impact on children was undeniably powerful. This cartoon Mexican bandit made stealing corn chips seem like a charming cultural tradition rather than actual theft. The character's exaggerated accent, oversized mustache, and criminal behavior reinforced harmful ethnic stereotypes, while simultaneously making antisocial behavior appear fun and consequence-free. Children absorbed these images during their most formative years, learning to associate Mexican culture with criminality and theft while finding the whole concept entertaining rather than offensive. The Bandito's success in stealing Fritos was always celebrated rather than punished, teaching kids that taking other people's snacks was acceptable if you had enough personality and charm. The guitar-playing, mustache-twirling character made criminal behavior seem like performance art, transforming theft into entertainment. Kids would playfully steal steal each other's Fritos while imitating the Bandito's accent and mannerisms, normalizing both cultural mockery and minor theft as acceptable forms of play. The psychological damage extended far beyond snack food preferences into fundamental attitudes about cultural respect and property rights. The Pillsbury Doughboy's evolution throughout the 1970s represented increasingly sophisticated emotional manipulation techniques. Early commercials simply featured the character being poked and giggling, but later advertisements developed complex narratives where the Doughboy became a trusted family friend who appeared during important domestic moments. Birthday parties, holiday gatherings, and cozy dinners all featured this little white character as a witness to family happiness. The genius was in the timing of his appearances. The Doughboy never appeared during conflicts or sad moments, only during idealized family scenes where everyone was laughing, hugging, and sharing food. Children's brains began associating Pillsbury products with family harmony and emotional warmth. The smell of baking bread or cookies would trigger memories of the Doughboy's presence, making Pillsbury purchases feel like investments in family happiness. The poke and giggle ritual became so embedded in popular culture that grocery store displays featured pokeable Doughboy figures, allowing children to physically interact with the character while their parents shopped. This tactile experience strengthened the emotional bond between kids and the brand, making Pillsbury products feel like connections to a beloved friend rather than corporate purchases. The Life cereal, Mikey Likes It campaign exploited sibling dynamics and peer pressure with surgical precision. The commercial featured two older brothers using their younger sibling as a human guinea pig to test whether a healthy cereal could actually taste good. When Mikey enthusiastically consumed the Life cereal, it served as proof that even picky kids would enjoy this nutritious option. The psychological manipulation was multi-layered. Older children identified with the cautious brothers, learning that it was acceptable to manipulate younger siblings into trying questionable foods. Middle children saw themselves in Mikey's position, absorbing the message that gaining approval from older kids required enthusiastic consumption of whatever they offered. Youngest children learned that their role was to be the family taste tester, earning love and attention through their willingness to eat anything. The Mikey Likes It phrase became cultural shorthand for unexpected approval, teaching children that dramatic enthusiasm for food products was a path to fame and recognition. Kids began performing exaggerated enjoyment of their meals, hoping to achieve Mikey-level attention and approval from family members. The Sugar Bear's smooth voice selling Sugar Crisp cereal was perhaps the most obvious example of using cool adult personas to make unhealthy food seem sophisticated. This wasn't a childlike character or friendly animal. Sugar Bear was a suave, jazz-influenced personality who made eating sugar-coated cereal seem like a mature, sophisticated choice. His deep voice and laid-back demeanor were designed to appeal to children's desire to seem older and more worldly. The Super Sugar Crisp name didn't hide the product's content. It celebrated sugar as the primary attraction. Sugar Bear made this honesty seem like confidence rather than concern, teaching children that openly craving sugar was a sign of sophisticated taste rather than poor nutrition choices. His catchphrase, "Can't get enough of that Super Sugar Crisp," normalized addictive language around food consumption. The animation style deliberately made Sugar Bear look cool and unflappable in every situation, whether he was performing music, solving problems, or simply enjoying his cereal. Children learned to associate sugar consumption with confidence, competence, and social success. The psychological message was clear. People who ate sugar were more capable and attractive than those who didn't. The Cocoa Puffs, "I'm cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs" campaign took a radically different approach by making mental instability seem appealing and fun. Sonny the Cuckoo Bird's manic behavior, wild eyes, and complete loss of control when encountering chocolate cereal taught children that extreme emotional reactions to food were not only normal, but desirable. The animation deliberately made Sonny's psychological breakdown look entertaining rather than concerning. His spinning eyes, flapping wings, and incomprehensible babbling were presented as evidence of the cereal's irresistible appeal rather than symptoms of unhealthy food obsession. Children learned that losing control over food desires was a sign that you'd found something truly special. The most disturbing element was how other characters in the commercials reacted to Sonny's manic episodes with amusement and approval rather than concern or intervention. This taught children that adults found food-related mental instability entertaining and acceptable, normalizing extreme emotional responses to sugar consumption as family-friendly entertainment.
Don't be scared. I'm the super sweet monster with the super sweet new cereal, Count Chocula.
The Count Chocula monster cereal campaigns merged childhood fears with sugar cravings in psychologically complex ways. Count Chocula wasn't just a friendly monster, he was a sophisticated character who would overcome his terrifying nature through the power of chocolate cereal. This taught children that monsters could be domesticated and befriended through proper food. Choices. The gothic imagery, dramatic music, and spooky sound effects created genuine fear responses that were then immediately resolved through cereal consumption. Children's brains learned to associate anxiety relief with eating chocolate-flavored sugar, creating emotional dependencies that extended far beyond breakfast preferences. The Count's Transylvanian accent and formal mannerisms made him seem like an educated, aristocratic figure rather than a simple cartoon character. This elevated chocolate cereal consumption from childish indulgence to sophisticated cultural practice, making kids feel worldly and refined when they chose Count Chocula over regular cereals. The psychological conditioning was complete. Children learned to seek comfort from their fears through sugar consumption, to associate sophistication with unhealthy food choices, and to believe that making friends with monsters was possible through proper snack selection. These weren't just commercials selling cereal, they were complex psychological programs reshaping how children understood fear, friendship, and food. As you sit there now, probably tasting phantom flavors and hearing long-forgotten jingles echoing in your memory, you're experiencing the lasting power of these carefully crafted psychological interventions. These weren't innocent entertainment, they were sophisticated behavioral modification programs disguised as cartoon fun. The fact that you can still remember Tony's roar, the Doughboy's giggle, and Lucky's Irish brogue proves just how successfully these animated manipulators colonized your developing mind. The real question isn't whether these commercials were effective. Clearly, they were devastatingly successful. The question is whether you've ever truly escaped their influence, or if every food choice you make as an adult is still being whispered to by the animated characters who taught you what to want before you even knew wanting was possible. Toucan Sam's Follow Your Nose philosophy for Fruit Loops represented one of the most sophisticated sensory manipulation campaigns in breakfast cereal history. That colorful beak wasn't just distinctive, it was a biological tracking device teaching children to prioritize artificial fruit scents over actual nutritional needs. The rainbow colors of his feathers perfectly matched the artificial dyes coating each Fruit Loop, creating visual harmony between the character and product that made the cereal seem like natural, bird food rather than chemical-laden corn. The Follow Your Nose directive was particularly insidious because it taught children to trust artificial fragrances over logical thinking. Toucan Sam's adventures always led him through fantastical landscapes toward the irresistible aroma of Fruit Loops, suggesting that following pleasant smells would lead to treasure and happiness. Kids learned to associate artificial fruit scents with adventure and reward, making them more susceptible to other artificially scented products throughout their lives. The tropical setting and Toucan Sam's exotic accent transported children to a jungle paradise where colorful cereal grew naturally on trees. This environmental fantasy made Fruit Loops seem like wholesome tropical fruit rather than processed corn coated in artificial flavors and colors. Children's brains couldn't distinguish between the animated jungle and real rainforests, creating associations between environmental conservation and cereal consumption. The Honey Nut Cheerios bee took the concept of natural sweetness and weaponized it through character-based persuasion. This wasn't just any bee, it was an industrious worker who had personally gathered honey to improve regular Cheerios. The animation showed the bee flying from flower to flower, collecting nectar with visible effort and dedication, making the honey coating feel like a personal gift rather than a corporate sugar addition. The bee's small size and fuzzy appearance triggered protective instincts in children, who saw this tiny character working tirelessly for their breakfast enjoyment. Kids felt guilty about not appreciating the bee's hard work if they didn't enthusiastically consume Honey Nut Cheerios. The psychological manipulation transformed cereal preference into a moral obligation. Rejecting Honey Nut Cheerios meant rejecting the bee's generous labor. The buzzing sound effects and flower-filled animation created multi-sensory experiences that made artificial honey flavoring seem fresh and natural. Children's brains associated the cartoon bee's flight patterns with real pollination, making them believe they were consuming actual bee products rather than artificially flavored toasted oats. Snap, Crackle, and Pop turned breakfast into a percussion performance where children became active participants in their meal's entertainment value. These three elf-like characters weren't just mascots, they were a rhythm section teaching kids that food should provide auditory stimulation beyond mere taste. The famous snap, crackle, pop sound became a quality indicator, making silent cereals seem defective or boring. The characters' distinct personalities created a social dynamic where children identified with different aspects of the Rice Krispies experience. Snap represented excitement and energy, Crackle embodied mischief and unpredictability, while Pop delivered satisfaction and completion. Kids learned to see their breakfast as a relationship with three distinct friends rather than consumption of puffed rice. The animation showed the three characters actively creating the sounds from inside the cereal bowl, making children believe they were eating living, performing food. This transformed Rice Krispies from simple breakfast into interactive entertainment, where pouring milk became the opening act of a musical show starring tiny performers who lived inside each individual piece of cereal. The Jolly Green Giant represented perhaps the most successful example of making vegetables seem powerful and appealing through character association. This wasn't subtle marketing, it was mythology creation, where a massive, friendly giant personally endorsed green vegetables as sources of strength and vitality. The giant's enormous size and obvious health suggested that eating his vegetables would promote similar growth and vigor. The Ho 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 Green Giant jingle became synonymous with vegetable quality, teaching children that canned vegetables from this specific company were superior to fresh alternatives. The Giant's Valley setting looked more pristine and fertile than any real farm, creating impossible standards for natural food production while making processed vegetables seem more natural than actual garden produce. The most insidious element was how the Giant's approval transformed vegetables from medicine-like necessities into treats worth celebrating. Children learned to see canned corn and green beans as special foods endorsed by a magical protector rather than basic nutrition requirements. The Giant's presence made eating vegetables feel like joining an exclusive club of people worthy of his attention. Charlie the Tuna's perpetual rejection by StarKist created one of advertising's most psychologically complex narratives about self-improvement and corporate approval. Charlie wasn't just trying to get caught, he was desperately seeking validation from a company that consistently found him inadequate despite his obvious intelligence, talent, and charm. Every commercial showed this sophisticated fish being rejected for having good taste rather than tasting good. The psychological impact on children was profound. Charlie represented the smart kid who couldn't understand why being intelligent and cultured made him undesirable. His constant efforts to improve himself through education, art appreciation, and cultural refinement always backfired, teaching children that intellectual pursuits might actually make them less appealing to others. The cruelest aspect was that viewers sympathized with Charlie while simultaneously understanding that his eventual capture and consumption was the desired outcome. Children learned to root for a character whose success would literally mean his death, creating complex psychological relationships with food that extended far beyond tuna preferences. Looking back at all 25 of these animated ambassadors, you can see the complete architecture of a generation's mental conditioning. They didn't just sell products, they rewired how an entire demographic understood food, authority, friendship, and desire. The fact that their influence persists decades later proves just how successfully they colonized developing minds during those crucial Saturday morning hours. Which of these 25 forgotten friends still whispers in your ear when you're making choices in grocery store aisles today?